For it. You tell me.
Yeah,
It says live on Facebook. Good job, Jamie. Woo!
Good job.
Hey, first time live. The last two shows we did not make it on, and we are here. What I did was take everything off and put it back on. Change the password. I don't know. If,
there you go. Starting from fresh.
Made me feel better anyway, and now it worked. So
when I feel overweight, I sometimes take everything off, put it back on, and then I feel better too.
Well, that's what they tell you, though. Shut everything down, start from scratch, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see your naked ass anyway.
Of all days, look, like 2 shows ago, we had just very well-known people on there, great conversation. It would have been great if that was live. We recorded it. People ended up watching it. Last week, we had another great show. We're talking about Detroit a lot. We had the Collexium people on there. We had Q. That was awesome, but we had to record it and put it out. Today, though, the election is going on. Looks like we got a lot of participation from our host. Shelly's been busy doing harvesting and stuff lately, but she's managed to make it with us today. And Jim's here, Colin, right on. So, and we're going to be joined by some really good guests today. And essentially, we're talking about the elections. And there's going to be a few minutes when Paul Talinda, attorney, comes on, and we'll go over a little bit of the most recent Court of Appeals ruling on blasting concentrates, open blasting of concentrates. Another weird kind of a ruling, and maybe a little bit of a misfire on there. Maybe this is just what it's going to be like for safety reasons or something, but it seems kind of weird. And we'll have the attorney kind of walk us through that. But other than that, there's so much to talk about the elections.
Colin's bat-winging us. He's bat-winging us. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, look like it.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? I don't want to know, Shelly. Please don't.
Jim knows. He laughed.
I think if you stretch your sack in a particular direction and make shape out of it, you might get kind of like a. You can make like a sail. You can make like something that looks like a hamburger. All types of stuff.
How do you know this? Do you guys do this? I mean,
it's in the movie Waiting. It's in the movie Waiting.
No, there's also like a Broadway show.
Yeah, but Jamie seems to have like all the particulars. If you
I was practicing to audition. I was practicing to audition at one point. I didn't think that there was anything more important than the election today. I guess we came across that.
An unhealthy degree of knowledge.
If you pull it off.
So anyway, if I could get back on the intro of the show here for a second. We have a lot to talk about. And of course, tonight, Rick is going to be a part of and hosting a special watch on the elections, and maybe even get some of the results as they come in later tonight with Michigan Normal. So we'll talk about that more today too, but that'll be a good thing to go into a little while after this is over with, get some foundations up. And as I said, maybe a departure with Paul Talinda about the Court of Appeals ruling. And he'll have a lot to say about the elections too. He's very into this kind of stuff and aware of what's going on. I'm sure he's got an opinion, but I just want to know if anybody here has ever believed that another election in their life was more consequential than this one, and talk about it. Answer briefly if you want, or expound a little bit. But to me, all things considered, I think this is the most consequential election of my lifetime. That's how I view this. What do you got, Rick?
I can tell you that. When we tried to unseat Bill Schuette in 2014, I thought that was a hugely important election. Maybe not on a worldwide scale as this particular one was, but at that point, the cannabis industry as it existed was really under attack. Our caregivers were on the front line. Our patients were being jailed for just minor transgressions. It seemed like that was hugely important. Now, I appreciate that in my microcosm that it was at that time to me, but looking at it from a global perspective, I don't think there's an election that's had the consequence that this one does. I can't think of one in my lifetime. I'm 54 years old. I know, I don't look it, but I'm 54 years old. And I just can't even think before my time when there might have been a more consequential one. When we were in armed conflict, when we were in the midst of World War II, Or perhaps the Vietnam conflict? Perhaps. I don't know. Jim Salame, what about you? Can you think of a different time when an election carried more potential weight than this one?
I can't, but being older, my perspectives are a lot different than they were in the past, and I think this is just the beginning of this election and the ones to come, and the importance of voting and making sure that we're represented out there. So it's starting to. There's never been. The answer to the question is no, but I think we're going to see this every 4 years now.
I hope not. Wow, this was a crazy time for us. Before Shelly takes a nap, let's get her input on this one. Shelly, you look really comfortable. A couple of weeks, as Jamie mentioned, doing the harvest thing. That'll tire somebody out. But it might be a good way to avoid having to deal with all the political crap we've dealt with while you were sequestered in a room with wonderful cannabis plants. What's your feeling about this particular election? How weighty, how huge is it?
It feels pretty huge, but so did 2016, really. I mean, I think I was sitting with Jim at home and we were watching the numbers roll in, and we were all just kind of in shock. I mean, I was sick, getting together with my friends every day. That whole next couple weeks, we were like sitting together going, what the fuck just happened? I mean, we were so surprised and shocked.
I was there
on
too,
that night. You were there. You guys were there.
So it was so shocking that you forgot my existence.
It was so shocking because we were ready to party. We were ready to celebrate. And
we were making jokes. We were making jokes about Trump winning.
We were making jokes. And also it was a very strange feeling because all these great cannabis things were passing at the same time as we were realizing that he was going to get elected. And then actually when Obama was elected, that felt so huge. That just felt like a huge thing. It didn't feel as consequential, but it just felt huge. So, but this one, I think, it's just so ramped up. I'm just so over the 24-hour news cycle, and thank God for harvest, because I really haven't tuned in at all.
I can remember
yeah.
when Bill Clinton went against George Herbert Walker Bush and he stopped him from receiving a second term. That was really big. I was not as politically aware then as I am now. Debra Young, though, what about you? You're a political junkie too.
I was Bill Clinton's driver during that campaign. I drove him around before he was president. During that, I was, dude. Okay, I worked on a lot of campaigns. I did a lot of work for the Michigan Democratic Party, and a very, very good friend of mine, Jerome Marks, hooked me up with that. I used to pick up Bill and Al Gore at the airport, drive the motorcades, blah blah blah. Anyways, I agree with Shelly. The last election, 2016, was so fucking important because we probably would not be where we are today if everybody didn't think it was so funny and voting third party and blasting all over their social media about lock her up and all this crazy ass shit, which I did not see much of this time. I saw a little bit of it, but not as much as we saw last time. We basically fucked ourselves in the ass last time.
Way overconfident.
We all thought it was a joke. And 2 minutes before the polls closed, Hillary Clinton's campaign ran a commercial last cycle. I'm sure most of you didn't see it because you're talking about how you were disappointed watching the stuff come in. 2 minutes before the polls closed, they ran a commercial. There was a little girl. She was waving a little American flag. I was talking to Jackie Jerome, the guy that got me that job with the Clinton campaign. He was in New York at Times Square waiting to celebrate, and I'm watching this commercial. I'm talking to him. I'm telling him what this commercial is, and he said she lost. It was a little girl with a little American flag, and she's waving it, and in the background they're saying, don't let anybody destroy your hopes. The women, the girls in America, blah. So you knew she lost right then. This was at 2 minutes to 8. They already had prepared this. The campaign already knew that this was down the tube because of all that crap. Now, having said that, and also want to validate the 2018 adult use, election here in Michigan that we all waited for. However, I am beside myself with anxiety this time because Have you seen the barricade around the White House? Have you seen they erected a barricade around the White House?
Yes.
What is going to happen with this
No.
dude? Shelly,
He calls for people to take out heads of states, and then he
all the way around
barricades
the White House.
himself in his own
There's
place.
a 20-foot fence all the way around the White House right now. They put it up last night.
What?
And yeah, dude.
A non-scalable fence. Can't climb it.
I don't know.
Demonstrated he could put up a wall really quickly. He didn't the whole time he was in.
I'm
Oh, bada bum.
Yeah, I'm hoping that if he loses, that he'll just be like, okay, well, fuck this, I'm leaving, and just packs up and leaves now instead of waiting till January. That would be part of his
out or go out
personality.
nicely. Either way.
Yeah, either way, he's going to do one or the other. He's either going to, like Jamie said, he's going to, barricade himself in and not leave, or he's just going to say, fuck it, I'm done, and walk out and leave Pence in charge for the next 8 weeks.
Take care
I'm really anxious.
Last time in
Ooh,
Russia,
yikes.
maybe just get dropped off and don't come back.
I did watch last night at midnight. I don't know if anybody's aware of this little town in New Hampshire that always has their election at midnight. They only have a few registered voters. This year, they only had 5 registered voters. Last cycle, they had 12. And this time, all 5 went for Biden because they vote at midnight and then they count them immediately. So they said, that's
like,
kind of
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It was like 4 for Clinton and two for
Yeah, that
Trump,
was
and then there's like
last
some
time, right.
independents and stuff last time for the rest of the votes.
But they're not always right. They all voted for Nixon in 1960, and we know how that went. So that's the one he did not win. But still, that was heartening.
Oh, wait a minute. Is that some sort of little measurement of who wins?
Because
like
they
they
say that
predict
it's
the
the first
winner?
place that
It's the
registers their
first place
count.
that votes, and that New Hampshire is kind of, they say, like a ballot. But I mean, it's only 5 people though. But still, it kind of made me feel a little better at midnight this morning. We'll see what happens. I'm very anxious. We voted last week, and all we can do is hope, because I just can't imagine 4 more years of this would just be outrageous. I don't know how long it's going to take to undo all the shit that's happened in these 4 years. It's permanently damaged this country.
Yeah.
Not just monetarily, but just in people's minds. People have become whole different human beings than they were before.
Yep.
It's very scary.
We were always distrustful of government, but now government's lived up to some of our worst expectations. Colin macDougall, what about you, big man? In your enormous number of years that you've been on planet Earth, what do you think about this consequential election? How big is this to you?
Well, I think in a way it's not as big as last election to me. I know this is kind of weird, but I feel like there was more of something I was more passionate about to see get pushed through at the last election. I worked knocking doors and stuff for weeks and weeks upon weeks before that election, and there was also a couple of ballot initiatives that weren't marijuana that are important for this election too, because we have no reason absentee now and early voting and everything, and I think that with that one also Bill Schuette was running for governor, and we were trying to get Dana Nessel.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
The Attorney General. So I mean, it was just I had more skin in the game or something last election. I'd say this is really important, and I feel it feels different than it did last time, and I think that hopefully it turns out in our favor, and with the Democratic Party, taking back what they took away from us. I would compare it also, I guess, to 2008. That was my first time voting when we elected Barack Obama. And I was gonna say back then, at that point, I had just graduated high school, and me and some of my friends, they might have still been in high school too. We would steal John McCain signs off lawns.
Oh my god!
Something fun.
No!
You little vandal!
Come on.
I had tons of them too. I had we had these things full of them. They were boxes full of plastic John McCain signs.
Nice.
Ones people made, the There was like
Wow.
an assortment of them that we
So
had.
I was, I was more personally and emotionally involved in 2018 also, and that was such a profound experience to go to the convention and
Yeah.
be a part of that whole Dana, beating out the giant, the chosen one, because the people came together and made that happen. But I guess in consequences, when I look at this one, we're talking about our standing in the world and the environment and recognition of the balance of powers, and that's kind of stuff puts it into a whole nother league for me. I mean,
And not feeling creepy anymore. Don't you feel creepy? I feel so fucking creepy that this guy is our supposed leader. It's disgusting.
Well, I'll tell you. Wait, has everybody gone? I don't know if I've interrupted someone.
Shelly, you
Go
jumped
ahead,
in.
Shelley.
Deborah, who you said
I was
our
just
leader?
gonna
You're talking
say-
about Trump, right? You're talking about Trump.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Who do you
Shelley,
think I was
go
talking
ahead.
about, Jamie?
No, I thought you were talking about Biden when you're talking about
No.
creepy, because that
No,
sometimes
no.
is a term
Right.
that's tossed at him.
I'm talking about Trump. For
Yeah,
real.
yeah. And I guess it's interesting because I've been so gratefully out of touch with the news cycle, like on my knees grateful, because I think I was so floored 4 years ago that I need to be at peace no matter what. And I need to realize that my day-to-day existence, the people I love, the decisions I make are intact for myself. And so I think that is much more here than it was last time, because last time I was surprised, just so surprised. I couldn't believe it was happening. Like this man isn't a president. He's a reality TV star. I don't understand what's happening.
He's not
gotta be
even
a joke,
that.
right? Like,
Yeah.
right. But what I mean is, like, now I was checking in with a bunch of my girlfriends and stuff last night and just saying, how are you? Are you anxious? Are you okay? Because some of them are very, very anxious about it. And I just want to know, I just want to know that I'm centered and grounded and kind of above it all.
Yeah.
At my
And then
core.
we're all going to wake up in the morning, regardless of what happens. We're still going to be here and alive and just have to fight harder. But still, I understand how they're feeling. I've got a ball in the pit of my stomach, and I'm going to be up all night watching this shit, because to me,
Bush
this
v.
is just
Gore.
I'm not going to watch
Bush
a
v.
single
Gore.
thing. I'm not going to.
Right.
So let's
might be up all night long because of what happened with Bush v. Gore.
That's
I mean, we
right,
went to
that's
bed
right.
thinking Gore was president, woke up, Bush was the guy.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to sleep and let that happen again. I'm just.
It's not. That's the thing. Is
It's not going to happen tonight.
You
We already,
being
like, know.
anxious.
Maybe.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
but
Jocelyn
you being
Benson
If
said
enough
she
Dems
was
showed
gonna
up
have
and
this
just kicked
counted
his ass
tonight.
with existing votes.
Yeah.
My point
And I
is,
saw-
us being anxious or angry doesn't change what happens. So why put yourself through the
No, I
angst
know.
and terror?
But how do you control that? How do you stop it, Shelly?
Hey, don't tell me not to be angry.
It's everywhere. You have to be. Yeah. Stop telling.
You have to turn
you
on
can't
the
logically
switch.
emotion
is what you do.
You have
Yeah,
to
you can't
detach
turn them
from
on and
the.
off.
I'm telling you to detach from the 24-hour news cycle.
Well, it's
Yeah.
almost
That's what I'm
over.
saying.
And 24 hours and we'll be okay. When the morning, like I say, we'll have a pretty good idea of how this is going to be. We won't have the exact, because we never know for sure until electoral college is done
Right.
and all that stuff. But we're going
Right.
to have a pretty good idea, by morning, and then I can exhale, and then I believe I'll be okay. And then
All right,
so
I'll join you in La La Land, because I'm like tight as I can't even explain
Yeah.
it. but
Join you
I
in
am
La La
bad
Land.
shape. Yeah.
The La La Land
Watch
thing was
Schitt's
perfect.
Creek. That's a really good show.
That is a really good show.
I
And it
know,
won
I'm
every
watching
every
it, but it's
single
not pulling me
conceivable
down.
award
I'm
that it
trying.
could win. It won that night.
Oh,
But let's talk about some of the other things, Pat. We'll invariably have to talk about the president again, but there's an opportunity maybe for the U.S. Senate to change hands. That would be quite huge. Some things could actually then get accomplished in the
Right.
federal legislature that get rid of Mitch McConnell and company.
He might get his ass kicked. I've seen that he's like.
It's all part of the formula that
Yeah.
could equal a flip. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen, but it is sitting there as a possibility.
Well, again, 2018 was the largest blue wave we've ever seen in the history of American politics. More Democrats.
More people are
defeated
voting now.
Republicans. Yep, more
Did we ever
Democrats.
find out why his face and hands were all fucked up last couple weeks?
He
Did
didn't
they
say
ever
why. He did say that it was.
Who?
It is that way, but it's got to be on.
Mitch
It's because of
McConnell.
meth.
It's usually
His
a
whole face
blood
was
thinner
smashed in
scenario,
and his
right?
hands were
Yeah, it's like a
purple.
blood thinner.
That's what it
Oh.
looked like to me.
It gives you like a broken nose and black eye effect, and then purple hands.
He's in a fight club.
Start decomposing. He was imploding.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he
McConnell
was.
started a fight
Yeah.
club.
It'll happen to all of us one day, okay? Come
When
on,
you kiss
guys.
not
Trump's
all
ass
of
that
us.
Don't make
long,
fun of the elderly and insane because we're going to be that someday.
the distinct parts of your body get bruised when all you do is kiss
It
Trump's
looked like
ass.
he'd been in a fight or something, didn't it? It looked
know,
like somebody
yeah, it
beat the shit out of him.
They had
Nah,
that
he just got
picture of
kicked
his
a bunch
hands.
of
They were.
times and it happened.
Probably he'd been getting the shit kicked out of him ever since he was in grade school.
Well, why didn't he just say
Oh,
that then? Why didn't he just
no.
say I'm old as fuck and this is what happens? He's like,
'Cause he doesn't
nothing's
have
fine. I
that,
don't know
but-
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And he looked
Well,
like he was
it's
in a
a
Halloween
came from a
In
rosin
costume.
Trump land,
press.
you can't admit
Came
weakness
from
in
a
Trump
rosin
land.
press.
That's
Oh,
right.
rosin press.
Rosin
That'd be
press.
nasty rosin to smoke. Ugh, Mitch McConnell's hand rosin.
Oh, yeah, Mitch McConnell.
Honestly,
OG.
though,
Full of
like,
betrayal and
so
greed.
mean.
Ugh.
What you got,
we all
what do you got,
we all
Colin?
seen Jimmy Carter bang up a house like that, so
This
Yeah.
last year he was
you know,
building
because he
houses.
probably hit his hand or something. He didn't just
Habitat for Humanity.
explode.
Yeah. I don't think Mitch McConnell can claim he was doing charitable work and
He
hurt
was
his
out
hand.
working really hard on behalf of other people
I'm just
and
saying-
hurt himself a little bit.
quit picking on McConnell for that. You know, being old.
We're not
Yeah.
all
Youngest guy is
Congress.
All
defending
the
the old people.
things.
Okay.
like all those judges
wasn't
that he
taking him
instead
on
of
for
instead of
being
working
old.
on
True.
like,
Okay, I forgot about all
taking
the
him on for
judges.
being bruised.
instead of working on like real laws and things that are actually going to help people, all they did was put a bunch of judges through.
You know what I constantly
Oh
hear
my
from
God.
the hemp
Amy
industry says
Lafayette, Coney Brown, whatever the fuck her name
Totally
is.
fucked up.
Yeah.
the hemp industry keeps saying things like Mitch McConnell loves hemp. We got to keep him in place in Kentucky because he's a big champion of hemp. Bullshit. He may love
Bullshit.
hemp.
He's not.
He may think that's the future of Kentucky, but he hasn't done anything in order
He
to
hasn't
end
done anything.
those.
He
Nothing.
knows that sooner or later tobacco's going to go away. How can tobacco continue when everybody knows how horrible it is? So that's probably what he's banking on, like Rick says, for the future. But he don't care about hemp now. Fuck him.
I'd like to see a program where we replace coal mines with solar panel factories, and we put those people we repurpose those workers so that they can feel good about walking into a new renewable energy scenario. Maybe they could make those gigantic turbines for the windmills.
Those are cool.
They cause cancer and kill birds.
Yeah.
That's right. They're killing
I like both
birds.
of those things, dead birds and tumors. My two favorite things. But the west side of Europe has a lot of offshore wind machines where they actually capitalize on the never-ending breeze coming off the Atlantic Ocean. And we could be producing and installing those too. There's ways we could put people to work that a place like Kentucky doesn't have to go, negative on the job scale. We could improve the job scale in Kentucky. We just need somebody not named Mitch McConnell to
More
represent.
bourbon.
Yeah.
They could be pumping out
Well,
way
there
more
is
bourbon.
hemp there. There is hemp there, but there's a lot of room for more sensible
For more hemp.
approaches to cannabis. They can make a lot of jobs through that avenue too. People are
Our
trying.
federal government
Grape
needs a
growers already in Kentucky.
We need one guy that's the hemp champion, one guy or female that's the hemp champion in the legislature that says, I know
We need
all
to get
about-"
Jeff Irwin up there.
It's not all about like
Oh.
Boehner or McConnell who have dollar
Yeah.
signs in their eyes over it.
Right.
People who actually kind of have the bigger picture.
Well, also there's like in Colorado today, Hickenlooper is running for Senate against Cory Gardner, and he's projected to like win. Flip that one. So he could be our champion. I mean, I don't see
Wow.
like Gary Peters or Debbie Stabenow really.
No.
No. Maybe well, I mean,
No.
Cory Booker is good, but he's more like New Jersey's not really a hemp state. You're not like it is. He's good on a lot of marijuana justice reform, though.
And that's another one. There are 5 states that have some form of cannabis. Either
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. I'm out of touch
And-
with that.
Yep, and New Jersey's one of them, which is a huge
Yeah,
state
right,
in
New
the
Jersey.
Northeast.
No.
Yeah.
New Jersey's program, which would be for adult use cannabis, is polling at about 2/3 support for the cannabis proposal. So that has the best chance of passing. The one that's the tightest race is Arizona, which has been polling within the margin of error, right around 45-45. So it's difficult to say about Arizona. But I did just read Russ Belville's article today about this thing in Mississippi. And let me tell you about Mississippi. They have 2 proposals in Mississippi. One generated by the people, one generated by the legislature. But wait, there's a 3rd proposal in Mississippi. So here's how it works.
That's not good.
Here's how it works. If you want the citizen proposal, you have to vote for the citizen proposal. If you want the legislative proposal, vote for the legislative proposal. But if you want either one of those 2, you have to vote for the 3rd proposal, which says, should we change our laws regarding cannabis? Now that's
Oh my God.
That's
terrible.
Oh my God.
So you can say yes on the one you want and no to the one that, and then it would just invalidate everything. So
People
the
don't even
legislature,
understand that.
they're not. The legislature
so
set it
if-
up in an odd way.
For example,
Terrible.
if the citizen one passes by majority and the thing that says, should we change this, doesn't get enough support by majority, it's obvious that people were confused. So, I mean,
Yes.
Right.
then it was bullshit.
Yep. So the
Not part of the
citizens-
democratic
bullshit.
process. And it's
citizens
you
put the thing up, proposal 65. Then the legislature offered their alternative 65A, and then the legislature threw this additional question on there to make it even more difficult. Now,
Is that 65B?
no, it's a completely different one. And that's what's even
Weird.
more confusing, because instead of being in a
Right.
series of those, it's actually in a different spot of the ballot itself.
Oh my
So,
God.
I know the chance of success is
Well,
very
what-
minimal.
The way you have to campaign that is whatever proposal you're for, say you're for the proposal A, you have to say, vote yes on A and yes on whatever the other 3rd is,
Yeah.
and campaign it like that. Just,
Yep.
concentrate on those.
Yep. So
That's too much though. That's expecting people to read and to understand and to remember, and that's a lot for people when they get into but there's going to be a huge turnout this year, and people voted at home. A lot of people voted at home, which gives you more time to talk about it and look at it and decide. It's not the same as going in and you got to decide in 30 seconds. All of a sudden you've forgotten the damn judges' names, and
Yeah.
you know how
Yeah.
that goes.
Wasn't Texas had a really unique set of numbers, like the amount of people who have already voted
Yes.
exceeded the number of people who voted in the last election.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And they
If
had all
Texas
these drive
flips-
through.
If Texas flips, man,
is
what the fuck,
conservative.
man?
Yeah. So that all
Jesus.
those people cannot be conservative Republicans voting. They've got, they're 100% of their people already turned out. It's just not possible. Jamie's right. That could flip. I think people are
Right.
just outraged and they just want to pull
So-
this dude out.
Right? To get
Yeah,
back to
there was. I just heard a
Sorry.
story about. I just heard a story. You guys might already talked about this, but there was a story about drive up, sort of COVID-friendly voting polls that had already had 130,000 votes cast.
Right.
That some Republican lawyers were challenging and trying to get those votes disqualified,
they were
saying
denied.
they
Yeah.
were invalid
were
for some
denied.
They
reason.
also,
But they
in the
were already
county
at
where Houston is-
130,000 votes.
Yeah, in the county where Houston is, they had like 12 polling boxes where people could drop off their ballot, and the governor there reduced that down to one.
one
Yes.
per district.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Just
that it had to be
one,
more, that it would be safer. But just to get back to the president for again, we have a couple other big components of things to talk about too that are
We
at
gotta
play in
take
this
it
election.
down.
There are many conservatives, many Republicans, including most of the people who once worked alongside of the president, who are very clearly saying we are not voting for him. We're voting for Joe Biden to reset
Yeah,
government.
a lot of them.
Start from scratch again.
Like
There's a
generals
lot
and
of-
shit. Yeah, staff members, generals, cabinet members. I mean, really big people.
There's the Lincoln Project, and
That's all of
with
former
Yeah.
Republicans or current Republicans who are opposed to the president, who's donated tons and tons, millions of dollars to put on these really excellent commercials. They had Sam Elliott narrated one, Martin Sheen narrated one. Who's the attractive actor guy? That's Brad Pitt. Narrated
Who's
one
the
too.
attractive actor guy?
There's only
There's
one.
only one.
I mean, right?
That guy?
Yeah.
That one
Everybody
guy?
else in Hollywood's short.
Maybe it was Jim Salame. Have you heard about
I have,
him?
but
Handsome
he's a
actor
Michigan
guy.
actor guy.
You
Have you heard about
I
him?
thought we were talking about the
Rainbow
5
commercials?
places in the country that have
He's a
cannabis.
wildlife lover. He's an outdoorsy kind of guy too.
Aren't we,
Jim?
aren't we talking about the 5 places that have cannabis laws on their
On the
ballot?
ballot? Okay, so so we talked about Mississippi, talked about New Jersey, we
Right.
talked about Arizona.
Okay.
Okay. The other to South Dakota. South Dakota has proposed one for medical and one for adult use, which is very unique. They'll be able to impose both medical and rec at the same time, which is actually pretty freaking cool. And what's the fifth state? For some reason, it just escapes me right now.
Montana.
But thank you, Montana. Yep, and that's a medical proposal. I think it is.
Nope.
I believe, is that legalization? Yeah, the only medical would be
Mississippi.
South Dakota, Mississippi's.
And South Dakota, yeah.
Well, yeah, but South Dakota's going to get them both. What's also interesting is that Oregon State and Washington, D.C. are both voting to potentially decriminalize entheogenic substances today. And that would be
Ooh.
huge if they
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
Yay.
Yeah. Now, in addition to that,
That's cool.
there's a ton of other proposals that are of interest. Eliminating cash bail in California, emancipating people from certain obligations of the state in other places too. There's a lot of right-sizing the laws to a 2020 way of thinking going on out there. And in Michigan, we were kind of concerned because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we didn't think people would be able to successfully conduct petition drives. But in Michigan, there are 9 local communities, 9, that have ballot proposals that are being decided today. And Sam Pernick will be joining us later on today. It was in charge of the signature collecting for 3 or 4 or 5 of those.
Yeah. So, and then before Sam, we're going to also hear from Tammy Vanderberg from the West Michigan Cannabis Guild and many other things. She's just
Cool.
quite a powerhouse of a presence, business owner, foundation participant, Politico, everything. She gets positive things done on a regular basis. And she worked really hard on this election too. And there's many seats in the state house that have held some that are ripe for getting flipped. And we can talk about some of that with her and talk about some of the local stuff with Sam. And in a few minutes, we'll have Paul come on and we'll
Talk
go
about
on
this.
that too. Yeah, but go ahead, Rick.
So really in Michigan, we had 3 different groups that helped out with voters this year. The MICIA did a candidate questionnaire, which was incredibly illuminating that they shared some of that information with folks. The West Michigan Cannabis Guild held a series of candidate forums where they discussed things with individual candidates of a cannabis nature and gave their own list of candidate endorsements. And then the Cannabis Caucus of the MDP also issued a list of endorsements for this year as well. So this is probably the most citizen-based involvement that we've seen trying to direct people towards cannabis-friendly candidates. I mean, maybe in the 12 years of the medical era. I know we've done things in the past, but this is 3 different groups doing something. That's remarkable. Let's give our industry some credit for not just saying, yeah, we got what we wanted to, let's take our foot off the gas. We're still being involved politically, still pushing things in a positive direction. And, there's potentially some legislation that'll come up later this year that we're also going to remain involved in. And a press release went out earlier this week detailing some of that stuff too. So things are happening. So
we had Lily Cheng Schulting on our show for District 72 on the west side of the state. And we've had Nicole Braden, District 43. Those are 2 long-held Republican seats that are being seriously challenged right now. I don't know what the results are going to be. I'm not sure if it was that clear cut, but they have chances there. And a couple of those plus a couple more victories and get the majority in that and change that is important because there's a lot of, there's all this follow-up legislation and tweaking and of the cannabis laws and stuff that are going to go on, and to have a more sensible group of lawmakers looking at those issues only benefits us. We're concerned about them looking at some of the stuff over lame duck, and you got to somehow get through that and then get to a little bit more of a sensible group to resume these conversations. Would be good for us. I mean, I know we've talked about elections a lot because that consumes our immediacy, right? But we do have to have a little bit of a longer vision as well to look and see what's coming up next. And what we see is in Lansing, lobbyists are already advancing early versions of this potential bill, trying to drum up some support amongst the Democratic House reps and senators that are there because it would modify a voter-directed initiative. It does need a supermajority.
really tough standard to meet, and the Republicans cannot do it without Democratic support. But at this particular time, we're still expecting another version of this bill to be dropped on us by the Marijuana Regulatory Agency before it's introduced. We don't know what that bill is going to have as far as a content. We don't know how we're going to feel about it. It's disingenuous to negotiate with us about content of the bill if other people are already trying to advance its current version amongst legislators. So there's some concern about the way things are being held right now. Jim, I saw you tilt your head a little bit on
Can you hear me?
You just like stop
I
talking
can.
like really slowly or something.
The animals
I
are kicking in.
didn't hear your question, Rick.
Oh, well, we're expecting the legislature to do some tomfoolery here, trying to introduce a bill and lame duck and rush it through. We've seen this kind of thing happen before, haven't we?
We have, and I think Senate Bill 660 by Randy Richardville long ago comes to mind for me. I wonder what we can do right now as a community, maybe even writing our Democratic leaders to keep things intact. I mean, there's a reason why we voted the way we did. What was it, 64%?
Well, for the MRTMA was 56.
56. Yeah. So it's, I think we definitely have to be ready to reach out to our representatives and ask them to, keep things intact for the patients, for the caregivers, for the growers, for the home grow, going forward in the other things.
Deb, I'm interested in your opinion about the Gary Peters race, because in my area, I was just flooded with crap from the John James campaign and those other campaigns that were supportive of him.
Yeah, you'll have to excuse my barking dog.
It's okay.
Could you stop her for a minute, please? Yeah, and I actually talked to a friend of mine who's high up in the Democratic Party because I was concerned too. I have another friend who was canvassing in Southfield and Oak Park and said there were a lot of John James signs, and I think John James is as scary as Donald Trump. Sorry, guys, I don't know how you feel about him, but I think he is a real scary dude. So, yeah, I think there's some concern, but they didn't voice any concern. They said, "Oh no, Gary's got this. Don't worry."
Well, yeah. I mean, here's what I remember.
Oh, really?
From 2016. I remember former governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, going on CNN the morning of the election saying Michigan's going for Hillary Clinton. We got this. We got this, she said. And then, so I hated when people say that.
The difference was 10,000 votes, and there were 60,000 people who participated in voting but didn't vote for the president.
Yeah. They hated both choices so much.
And there was also a lot of third party too.
Yeah. Well, and it's just so frustrating to understand that she got 3 million more votes. And it's one of those things, like, it's hard for me to even talk about because the Electoral College is such a strange, like, just even when I think about it now, the fact that he lost by 3 million votes, like 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton, like, it's so bizarre. It's just, it's not even, she did have more votes. That's the thing, is she did win the popular vote, and it's just so strange how we run our country.
Well, we'd have to change the system,
bizarre.
and things made sense at different times and all that kind of stuff. But
when people were
that's
considered
the reality
3/5 of a person,
Yes.
it's time to get past
we
that.
have room for some evolving. Maybe some of the good things about the Trump presidency helped to inspire so much more participation than we've seen in recent history right now, and maybe that in turn then help inspire some much needed change into the future a little bit.
And you can also, I was gonna say, you can think of it as like, I was reading somewhere, it was saying like people in Michigan, their vote is like worth like up to like 50% more. Like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, and like Texas and Georgia,
Wisconsin, Ohio, North Carolina. There's like 6 of them that they have. There's a formula that you got to get, and if you don't get this formula, you're not going to get it. And they claim that Biden's got way more formulas than Trump, but Trump still has a path to this, dude.
He does.
This could still be a little touch and go and scary. And here we came around to Trump again, which is where we're going to land until this is over.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was mentioning to Jamie earlier today, some of the polls close in Indiana and Kentucky at 6 p.m. Polls close in Florida and North Carolina at 7 p.m. Now, Florida's already been counting absentee ballots. So by shortly after 7, we should have a pretty good idea of where Florida's going to be. Now, we can't guarantee anything till the end, but it'll be nice to know what that early count is, especially since it's going to be so heavily favoring Biden.
I don't think they announce it until all polls are closed. They don't announce presidential stuff until all the country polls are closed. They never do, Rick.
Well,
So you ain't going to hear numbers until when does California stop voting? Then you'll hear national numbers, or you'll hear state by state. But before that, they're not going to tell us shit. They can't.
I think they might start pulling them off, but I think Florida usually always takes forever because of like Broward County or something.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
that's,
if my memory
They continue to have hanging chads. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. So
but that's when we'll start to see numbers.
I think, is it the Trump administration or is it the Republican Party that's already starting to sue some cities for their ballot?
Yeah, they've been laying this groundwork forever, Jim. Don't you think? Don't you think that this whole postal service thing, that they've been laying the groundwork for all of this shit for months and months and months and months with everything? It's all seriously, and I'm not a conspiracy. You guys know I never buy into this shit. Everybody's see all of this.
Everybody's wondering what side you're leaning on for this election.
Attorney Paul Talenta has joined us.
Very difficult to see through that facade.
Take yourself off mute, Paul, and jump on in the game here, buddy.
Right, Jim? Are we right? I mean, come on. This is really, come on. They're already laying
don't be subtle. Don't be subtle. Express yourself with us. Don't be subtle.
Right on, Deb. Sorry, Deb. We're just joined by Paul, who looks like he's about ready to light up a joint and join us in that regard as well.
Joints for victory, everybody. Yep.
And we're talking about the elections a lot, Paul, so we definitely want to hear what you want to say about that. But the only thing we really want to deviate today is about the Court of Appeals ruling and the open blasting issue.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let me start with the election. So I'm tickled pink by the fact that there are pro-Trump, pro-pot people, and the inconsistencies of that require a great amount of intellectual gymnastics and just a great amount of personal dishonesty from those people. If you've seen the movie Half Baked, Dave Chappelle has a great reference in terms of what happens when people get, they consume too much and they've really changed the functioning of their brain to the point where, the challenge I've always had, and I'll keep this open, $500 to somebody who can tell me what Trump did to advance cannabis and how is that better than what Obama did. And you know how many people have been able to answer that question for me? Zero. So all these pro-cannabis people who are like, oh yeah, Trump is great, they can't seem to connect the dots. So the problem is that there's a disconnect with the life that they are living and some of the ideals that they have. It's just terribly inconsistent. I mean, to the point where Jeff Sessions was the AG. I mean, it couldn't get stupider than that. Like, how dumb do you have to be? I mean, this is the whole cartoon of, the sheep listening to the wolf, and the wolf is saying, I'm going to eat you. And the sheep are like, what a great guy. Gives it to us straight. Tells it like it is. I mean, it's like, how dumb do you have to be to find out that, when this is the one outlier, this is the one thing that you like all of a sudden you love freedom, but all of a sudden hate cannabis. It's how can you do that? And I have never had, and again, maybe it's my size, maybe it's my voice, maybe it's the amount of words that I use, but I've never had anybody in earnest, in any honesty, with any endeavor to think that they were correct, try to tell me that Trump was good for cannabis. Now, they always will say, I'm pro-Trump, and I just happen to be in the cannabis industry. And essentially what they'll do is they'll never answer the question. They will never answer the question. And that's the worst part, because it's hilarious to me I mean, it just tickles me pink to have people be like, God, it must burn you that Obama was better for cannabis. It really must stick in your craw that the guy that was born in Kenya, you know, all of a sudden was better to cannabis on a procedural and federal level than any president prior to or since. So that's where again it's intellectually dishonest.
Revisiting the birther conspiracy there, Paul.
That's exactly what it is.
I know.
Is this?
Oh, and by the way, John James for Senate. What a ploy! What a card! What a trick that was. It's funny as I did a little research, I did a little experiment, and I posted on social media that there's no such thing as a black Republican, and the white people responded, "Oh my God, that's so racist." And every single person of color who commented was like, damn right, right on, ain't no such thing. So there's a big goddamn disconnect with that. Because again, it's the ruse. It's the he's got a black face, so he must be for black folk.
Who is John James running against?
Gary
Gary
Peters for US
Gary
Senate.
Peters. And
no
he's got the
shit.
boss
So,
money behind him. He's slamming commercials, Shelly, because you said you're not watching. Constantly, he's got this big boss cash behind him, and it's
the other.
horrible.
I'm hearing some harsh stuff, really bad stuff.
Real negative.
The integrity level is super low in this campaign.
Really bad.
So
really
Paul, we've been asking everybody, and we've been joined by Tammy Vanderberg in the meantime, and we'll definitely be talking with her and be asking her at some point too. But is this the most consequential election of our lifetime?
It is, because we've never had such blatant fascism in America. We've never had such a disregard for the class and integrity of the leader of the free country. And yeah, this is one of those deals where everybody knows that, the second term for any president is like the rental car or the hotel room not in your name. You can treat it like shit and turn it back and have zero consequence. And that's essentially what it was. Now, there's been no doubt that Trump doesn't care about America and only cares about himself. And we've seen that time and time again. Now, with that in mind, it's going to be paying back the rich folk. So essentially, what I think is the comedy part of it is that we're going to make Mexico pay for the wall. Then you paid for the wall. By logic, that makes you Mexico. And with the plan with essentially taking care of the rich and nothing else, we are going to turn this country into a class structure similar to Mexico. We're going to have a bunch of rich people living on high in the hills behind gates, and then everybody else is going to be living in squalor,
fighting for
Mario.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of course, the Chinese were going to pay for those tariffs too, right, Paul? The Chinese were going to pay for the tariffs too, and that's actually a burden on American purchasers.
And farmers hate socialism until they're starting to get government checks, right? It's the same type of thing. Oh, that's my favorite part, is that everyone's like, oh, it's going to be a socialist country. It's going to be a socialist country. And I'm like, how come you're posting those signs on my fucking freeway, which is paid by the government? So anybody who truly is opposed to socialism would never see those billboards because they'd be driving on socialist roads. Yeah. These are just, again, it is dummies that are getting played and they're getting duped. And I actually think this is going to be the next implication, is that the question in a job interview of did you support Trump, yes or no, is going to become very popular, because it's going to have to do with, can you realize when you were being lied to? Are you smart enough to recognize a con?
Oh my gosh.
That's going to be on that employment quiz, you mean? Like, do you take pens from the office? Did you support Trump? Like, what?
Right.
Wow.
Are you
From a human resources perspective, I can tell you, you can't ask that question. You can't base your employment decision on that. You'll get sued. But yes, lawyer.
But it doesn't matter, because in a sense, if I can say, hey, are you dumb enough to not recognize a con? Are you dumb enough to not recognize when you're being lied to? Tell me honestly, because again, I'll figure that out sooner or later. And if that's the case, I think
like 40% of the country believes that shit. They're drinking it. They believe it. They're the fuck,
I can respect someone's opinion, but I don't have to respect the person. I can respect that you have a right to an opinion, but once you've expressed it and you want to tell me about how child abuse was taking place in the White House basement during the Clinton
In
era,
the basement with
Sure.
mother
you're done.
pizza and shit,
We're done.
In the
right?
basement
So
of
now
a
I
pizza
now
place
I
with
doubt
my
your
basement.
ability to reason and intellectually grasp concepts, right? I can still like you as a person and not trust you on an intellectual level.
Right.
A
It's
bunch
sort
of
of like
frat boys drunk playing Dungeons and
Let's,
Dragons, making
it's
up
like your
shit,
friend.
you know?
My friend believes that they're little green men. Doesn't mean I like the guy any less. No, but it doesn't mean I'm going to trust the guy with $10 or leave him with my kids. Fuck no.
Right.
You know, it's like
Right.
you can't trust that guy to run a lemonade stand if he's going to be
Right.
thinking that
And if
dumb
he
shit.
starts going crazy, you just remove him from your space.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So I have family who are the children of immigrants. They have
Yes.
complicated Polish last names and their parents have accents. And they're all like pro-Trump and anti-immigrant. And I'm like,
Yep.
hey, look, you motherfucker with a complicated long last name and a foreign sounded name and foreign speaking parents. Like, where the fuck do you think
Yeah,
you are?
like, what
And
the
I always
fuck?
ask my family, I'm like, oh, they'll be like, oh, it's illegal immigrants. And I'm like, all right, Polak, how can I tell the difference? Because your last name and your funny accent make me believe that you're illegal. So tell me how I can tell the difference because I'm a dumb Trumper.
Because he's not
I
from a
can't tell the
shithole
difference.
country. Trump already
Yeah,
identified
right.
the
Oh,
shithole countries.
right.
You know?
It must be because they're white, is what it is. It's like
Polacks
they're
are
not
white.
illegal because they're white.
They
That's
were
right.
one step above the shithole.
That's how it
Just a
goes.
step
Hey,
up.
let's
Well, let's talk about the concentrates, though, right, Jamie?
yeah, I do want to also kind of want
Nice
to
segue.
I want to bring Tammy in just for a minute though, at least because we're running a little bit off schedule, and I know she took some time off to join us. And before we get to that, Tammy, how about you weigh in on, and of course, Tammy Vanderberg, head of the West Michigan Cannabis Guild, also helped out with legalization process on MI Legalize, and just a long list of many helpful things to community, plus a great business community member in Grand Rapids with Pyramid Scheme and other things. If you want to add anything about yourself, that's cool, Tammy. And we're also wondering about if you believe this is the most consequential election of our lifetime.
Okay, just diving right in here, huh? Yeah, it's great to see everybody. I'm not sure I've been on this podcast before. I've heard about it.
No, we've tried for years. We finally were able to do it.
Happy.
You're in demand.
Thrilled.
The $5 in the mail. Yeah.
Thrilled to be here. West Michigan Cannabis Guild. I founded that, board member of MI Legalize. I own the Pyramid Scheme in the meanwhile in Grand Rapids and was a leader on decriminalized GR many years ago, and among a variety of other things. But thrilled to be here. It's a happy voting day, everybody. It's really nutty out there. Tensions are high and people are frazzled. But yes, certainly in my lifetime, this is consequential. I guess I haven't quite dug into, 68 was clearly a big one. And then, we could go back further, but this is definitely, I would say, top 5, no doubt about it. The stakes are incredibly high for so many people.
Can I just say that the name Pyramid Scheme, I think, is absolutely genius. And I've loved that name ever since I heard that. And I think it actually is a stick in the eye to the DeVos family that it sits in Grand Rapids and you call it a pyramid scheme. It fills my heart with love and hope whenever I hear that. I must commend you on that. I think it's genius.
Thank you. Thank goodness for youth. Looking back, that was high risk. That was a very high risk name. But we thought for an independent club downtown, we're basically a bastion of sort of organizing and music. What better name in Grand Rapids, center of DeVos land? Of course, we won't confirm or deny that it has anything to do with that. We kind of knew they wouldn't come out after us directly because they don't claim to be a pyramid scheme, but the level of control these folks have in West Michigan over basically.
What if you open a place called Multi-Level Marketing?
Yeah, right.
And of course, this is all a reference to the Avon Corporation for those people that aren't familiar. So
yes.
Amway, yeah.
Amway.
Scamway.
The illustrious Betsy DeVos, our Secretary of Education, her family. So yeah, happy to be here and chat a bit.
Tammy, is this the most consequential election though of your time?
Of my lifetime, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Stakes are They're so high. They're so, yeah. It's
Stakes are high and so am I.
It's in the air tonight.
I don't want it to be a free for all, though.
Thank
Okay,
goodness
and-
we have legal cannabis to deal with
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah. No thanks
That's
to
what I
Ted
said
Nugent.
during COVID.
Yeah. It's kind of makes me feel dirty quoting Ted Nugent on an election night when I want to. I need a shower. I'm a bad man. But Tammy, we talked about a couple of other elections of significance in Michigan, including the 2018 election, when we not only got Gretchen Whitmer, we got Dana Nessel, we got legalization. That was, even though it was a midterm election, it still felt huge, right?
yeah, I'll never forget that night in Detroit. When we won, kind of running back and forth between different parties. I remember I was at Whitmer's, and then I hit up Nestle's, and she was like, the numbers were not looking good at all at that point. Stopped by Nestle's, she was like super depressed, bummed out, and I'm just like, okay, maybe I'll stop back a little later. Took off, ran into Sam, who ran for Supreme Court last time. What's his name?
Baganastos.
So ran into him in the elevator. He just found out he lost. He was just like utterly depressed in the elevator. And I'm just like, I'm really sorry, man. I've run for election before. I've lost. I feel your pain right now, my friend. And then I'm like, all right, let me get over this legalization party. And
then that was Dana was her count was before like Washtenaw County and some other really favorable areas had been added in, and I remember that watching that trail go down too that night.
Yeah,
and she won.
I think she found out the next day, even
very early in the morning. But
yeah, and that was massive. I mean, both of her primary and her general were razor thin margins, and I mean, the fact that we got her in as Attorney General, I mean, that race really gave me a lot of hope on what is really possible, because to get somebody like Dana Nessel as an Attorney General, who I know many of you all worked very hard on that campaign, that was just incredible.
Well, 2018, I think, stands out to me so much because we had two battles to fight. One was in the primary in order to defeat Pat Miles, in order to get her the nomination. And then the second one was on the general election for that. So for many of us, Deb, Colin, myself, poor Zara was running herself crazy. We were fighting not only for legalization, but also for favored candidates, too. We had so many different irons in the fire at that point. And I think for the most part, we handled it with grace. I think we did.
I think we killed it. Yeah, we killed it.
So, I mean, on a global scale, though, this one much bigger than just a happy event for Michigan. This is one that could tip the scales. The Paris Accord, what's going on with nuclear weapons in North Korea again, Russia and potentially looking to expand their borders again, plus all the harassment of our military vessels. Paul Talenda, you know what's going on here too. I mean, this is really bad.
It's unfortunate. So my whole thing, before I became an attorney, I went to grad school in efforts to be a diplomat. Like I went to grad school in Poland. I wanted to be, take advantage of working with the international community and dealing with things like my colleagues that ended up in NATO and the EU and dealing with the actual, cross-border cooperation. So part of being a history nerd and being, having family from Poland, is I was always interested into what happened, how do these countries become so susceptible, and why was it so easy for one country just to not even overthrow, but create and carry such a heavy influence to where they were so loyal to the mother country without concerning themselves with their own country. And you study that and you watch it and you understand the history and a lot of the power plays that exist that make those situations possible. And that's the most troubling part of all this for me, is that, yes, we're experiencing a time when the chickens are coming home to roost. Yes, we've interfered with a lot of countries and a lot of leaders, and we've done a lot of things to create puppet governments, and now it's being done to us. And we don't like it any more than the people that we were doing it to liked it. So the consequence of this now is that if there's a second 4 years of essentially a president with no one to answer to, with that they're going to tout and believe that it was a referendum saying that everything I've done so far is okay and to keep going and double down on it, that's when we'll start to see more of the things like we have that turn us into a banana republic, or put us into a situation where we'll never have the comfort of the America that we once knew. And I'm not talking about, you know, this post 9/11 crap. I'm talking more of the internal problem where, you know, you're going to have ding dong Yahoo Trump supporters that think that's a great way to run the country, that have, you know, a blatant disregard for their fellow citizens. And, you know, you're going to have people saying, hey, look, we should really listen to scientists and believe in the truth and believe in fact. And that's going to be a radical idea. You know, that's the problem. I always tell my libertarian friends that are always like, oh, vote third party and all this crap. I said, you know, what'll happen, much like happened last time, is that if you don't get a soft middle guy and you go for somebody hard right, the next furthest left you're going to see is somebody towards the middle. Like I said, if Trump wins again, you're going to have somebody, you know, like a Bernie Sanders is going to look like Ronald Reagan by comparison, because people will say that the country is so far right that there is no movement to the left, and the left will be more in the middle. So, I mean, the consequence of that were huge. We saw a lot of that with George Bush. We saw a lot of that in the second half of Obama, where it's like you're not getting, you know, the real Republican Party is not the Republican Party under name right now. The Republican Party that we know right now are a bunch of radical rightist Tea Party guys, whereas the real Republicans, which might be the third party, would be the centrist party. And that would be, you know, terribly unfortunate, because essentially you'd have two Republican parties.
Let me just say this. The one thing that endures throughout all administrations is distrust in government. It's one of the things that once an American has it, it's very difficult to shake. It's very difficult to erase. And with every administration, we gain some faithful, and we also make some people distrust government. The continuation of cannabis' Schedule I status gives people lots of reason to distrust government, because it's perpetuation of a lie. But in this particular administration, this group of people has given Americans more reason to distrust government than in anyone else ever. And that includes Nixon. But here's why I say that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Look at the voting turnout so far. For a time when we could see people totally turned off by the last 4 years of government, saying, screw this, I'm out. You guys, you have no rules to this game any longer. Mm-hmm. Instead of that, instead of dropping out, they're lining up. They're waiting hours to vote. Right. I saw a story about a guy who was in a nursing home, and he wanted to vote. So they wanted to transfer him from one nursing home to the other, because that's the only way they could get him out of the nursing home and avoid the COVID protocol, so he could sign his ballot, because his kid had the ballot. So they had to transfer him from one facility to another just to create an opportunity.
What if all these people are Trump voters, though? What if there's all these early people are Trump voters, except for like us?
I cannot like the way they vote, but you got to respect the American value, though. I cannot not like the way they vote, but man, that lining up for a couple of hours in the cold to vote, not like lining up for a couple of hours and being abandoned after a Trump rally in Nebraska where it's sub-freezing temperatures and no buses show up. Senior citizens, thank you, Pennsylvania, Mr. Details.
And Nebraska.
Okay, both of them. Heard them both.
See,
totally believable.
Or die of heat stroke down in Florida.
Yeah,
we're hospitalized from it.
I want to believe two things. One is more voters favors the Democrats, because you'd like to think that's how democracy works. The other one is I'd like to believe that anger is what's keeping them in line for long hours and not love.
Yeah.
And I think agree. That's something that I have, because again, I know myself too. If I was like, fuck you, I'm going to fucking stand there for a day. But if I was like, hey, cool, whatever, I'd be like, oh, hour long? I'm out of here.
That's totally true. I see that as a personality trait of all of us, not on this particular call, but all Americans, right? Absolutely. If things are good, you don't really need to do the political things, but when things are hard, politics matters.
Well, and that's the thing, is I think about how, comfortable we were in between 2008 and 2016, because just like, oh, Obama, he's got it. Government runs like government should. Yeah, it's got its ins and outs and problems and whatever, but at least there's signs and gestures that we're starting to get more of a hug going on. At least we're starting to steps in the right direction, right? Can't happen overnight.
And he's a pleasant guy. I mean, and he's easy on the eyes. He's a good guy, and everybody likes him. So that
he was
that
a
makes
he was a
everything
gentleman.
good.
Intellectual, which is
Yeah.
the opposite of the young George Bush, who was really kind of buffoonish to a certain
Right.
degree.
Here's the
Smooth,
conversation I had
pretty.
earlier. There was and I forget
Awesome.
who it was, but a heavy Republican guy said, yes, George Bush was an idiot, but he was our idiot. And that was a distinction with Trump, is that Trump was someone else's idiot. And if you can get the idiot to do your bidding, it's good if he's doing the country's bidding. And that was the issue. I mean, you know, Bush had a 90% approval rating, you know, essentially going through that first term because of the whole 9/11 shit and all that. And that's just,
Right.
I mean, that was hard to overcome. You know, I always say, it's like, geez, I wonder what the Swift Boat Veterans for Peace are doing right now, you know?
Yeah.
But that's a lot where that type of stuff goes. And I just don't think with, even if with brand loyal Republicans, thinking men Republicans, thinking people Republicans, are jumping ship. And while they didn't have the balls to do so in public because of fear of persecution, they're just going to quietly say fuck you and try to vote the guy out, because they'd much rather say, much like a lot of people play in politics, is, all right, we're going to concede this round and fight the next round. Fuck it.
So, Tammy, in terms of the House of Representatives races in your area, are there some flips that could happen, some improvements?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Tonight's going to be bananas. I'm watching like 25 different races very, very, very closely. Couple of them I'm watching. In terms of the state house, we've got Bill Saxton, who is looking to turn a seat kind of in the East Grand Rapids area. He's polling pretty neck and neck. And then we've got Lily Chang Schulting, who's kind of Kentwood area, and she's polling very well to possibly flip that seat. Elizabeth Welch, who's running for Supreme Court, is a good friend of mine, and she lives like a mile away, and she's just been a progressive light in West Michigan
Hermick and Welch.
forever. You know, basically one of the few people really fighting hard on the left, but still accepted into the establishment. So she's done an incredible job, and her race is going to be so tight. I mean, that one is neck and neck, but she would be, you know, that would be 5 justices then that would lean left. So that's just a critical seat. We have Hillary Skolton. I'm actually on her campaign committee. She's running for Congress for Justin Amash's seat, who you may recall. He's national notoriety for voting for impeachment, and
A Republican that became an independent because he was so disgusted with the party, and he was viewed by many as a hero for stepping away from that mess.
And he was quite good on drug policy reform, very libertarian leaning, you know, terrible on environment, a bunch of other stuff, but very good on drug policy. Ran for president briefly for like 2 weeks and then dropped out. He's a fascinating West Michigan character, but so that seat is open. So we have Peter Meyer of sort of the Meyer legacy, who's 30-some-year-old guy, very, very polished, running against Hillary Skolton. This would be the first time that a woman would be representing the 3rd district, and also a Dem has not even had a remote chance of winning that seat in decades. So West Michigan is changing for the better. So yeah, Skolton, Welch, I'm going to be watching them. Those are both basically 50-50. Those could go either way. And then several state house races I'm watching really closely. And then interestingly, going all the way down the ballot to city of Wyoming, which voted overwhelmingly for Proposal 1, has a crazy conservative council, almost all old white dudes. No offense to anybody that identifies as that, but just very, very far.
No offense to Rick. Yeah.
Jamie's not offended, sure. Yes.
None of y'all. I was talking about other people listening or watching. Not representative of Wyoming at all. Wyoming is super diverse, and has been voting blue and then voted overwhelmingly for Proposal 1. So there's a guy running for council there named John Fitzgerald, he would be probably like the first vote. We're trying to stack these councils, right? And trying to get people on that are going to be willing to opt in to both medical and recreational. So John Fitzgerald was endorsed by the Cannabis Guild. And then the last two I'll quickly mention, which were also endorsed by the Guild, David LeGrand, state rep, who was pivotal in that expungement bill, really brought the sides together, worked for so long to get that done, along with many others, Irwin and many others. But so he's running, he's pretty safe. I don't expect him to be in trouble. And then Phil Skaggs, who's on our county commission, who actually works in LeGrand's office and also helped to write up that bill. So there's really exciting races to watch. Oh, one last thing. We also have a ballot initiative that was submitted for the city of Grand Rapids, which would move city elections to even years. Right now they're on odd years. This would move the mayor and the city commission races all to even years, which has been very, very controversial. The data shows that clearly way more people vote in even years, like 3 to 4 times as many people. However, as we saw today, when I walked in to get my ballot, it was just like, I knew it was long, but it was just like, okay, wow, all right. So people are concerned that city races are going to get a little drowned out, which also might not be the worst thing, because when I ran for city commission, all of the anti-drug zealots had just me to focus on, and so part of me thinks I would much rather run in an even year where the attackers have a lot more people to focus on rather than just 1 or 2 or 3. So that'll be interesting. I think that could go either way as well. So I did vote yes, just because I do feel like more people weighing in just generally is just always better. The more people that vote, the better. The more young people, the more people of color. So I voted yes on that, but I know a lot of people that are voting no. So yeah, this is so many fascinating things on this ballot.
Just for our viewers' education, naturally, in the even-numbered years are things like gubernatorial elections and presidential elections. So that's the reason why it's not just some numerical weirdness. That's the reason why we get more people that vote in these even-numbered years than any other way.
And it kind of like, even if we don't agree with something that might pass, it feels a little bit more acceptable if there were a lot of people participating in the process and voting.
Absolutely.
You mentioned about local things. We talked earlier in the broadcast briefly mentioning that there are 9 different local ballot proposals in the state of Michigan with cannabis on the ballot, including Northport, where Jamie and I spent some time last year in 2019 helping them enact.
I love Northport.
This is beautiful.
I have friends that own businesses up there, and we go up there. Oh, I love it. How does it look? How are all these races looking? Do you think they're gonna win?
Well, there are some races that are not really very favorable. For example, Northport would actually rescind the great work that we did and make it zero tolerance for cannabis businesses. So that's probably going to lose. Port Huron is probably the pro-cannabis proposal that's least likely to be successful. It was very controversial, went all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court. So I think the citizens of Port Huron don't like being told what to do. And there are a couple of different instances where the proposal would actually overrule existing cannabis rules for a city just to make it more advantageous. In some cases, like Utica, they're just adding a couple businesses and also probably be successful because they're not radically changing things. But there are other places where it really is a big switch. The one that's probably the most impactful, though, would be the one all the way down in the lower southwestern corner of Michigan, in Constantine. That would be the very first place people from Indiana and Illinois come into Michigan. And if a shop were to open up in Constantine, that would absolutely suck away a ton of business from other places just up the road who have already been established and have been counting on that out-of-state traffic for a long time. So if that passes, that could potentially negatively impact a lot of other communities further on up that Lake Michigan shoreline.
And Sam Pernick, who, of course, worked with all of us who worked on the legalization effort here, has gone on to continue doing work in this area, and he's led up a few of these local efforts around the state. And in a few minutes, I think he's going to come on here and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And Tammy, you and the West Michigan Cannabis Guild, so glad to see that you were doing candidate forums. You were live streaming them too. We really appreciate all of the work that you've done. You know, you came up with a list of endorsed persons, and so did the Cannabis Caucus, and the MICIA did as well. I mentioned earlier in the broadcast how remarkable it is here in 2020 when everybody could just be taking a victory lap and easing back into their rocking chair. We have so many different people that are actually still out there doing activism.
Yeah.
Paul, that goes for you too.
One other comment on that is we actually, so we did 4 forums. We had 4 candidates. It was just first come, first serve. Look, you're on the ballot anywhere in West Michigan, 7 counties, first come, first serve. You want to get on here. So we had 16 candidates. We did have to turn a couple away because we ran out of spots, but we had Peter Meyer on there. Like, he agreed to do it. I mean, this is a very Republican, kind of like evangelical type Republican, and the fact that that guy even agreed to participate, let alone like how reasonable he was. Not that, I mean, vote Hillary Scholten, definitely vote Hillary Scholten, but I mean, what a shift, what a massive shift in stigma, right? We approach a lot of other folks too that were just like, yeah, no, I can't touch anything with cannabis, but that is just less and less. And I was absolutely thrilled. We had a judicial candidate that, you know, it was difficult because, you know, in terms of what she could actually answer. But the fact that she was on there in West Michigan, you know, the stigma, we're making huge gains in reducing the stigma, but it's still a bit of a risk, especially for Republicans to get involved with anything cannabis related. So that to me was really exciting and interesting.
You know, Gretchen Whitmer and Dana Nessel at Hash Bash, that was big. Debbie Dingle at Hash Bash, that was big too. Remember Gary Johnson back at 2014, I think, who was at that time running for the presidency, or 2012, yeah. I think. 2012. Was it 16?
16, yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, but when he was at Hash Bash, he was also running in 2012. He was also
in 12. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's when he was at Hash Bash, and then those were all huge things. But you know, to come home and to own it in front of the hometown crowd, that takes a little bit more. It's easy to you know, to get your photo in the paper in some city halfway across the state, but you know, and you live streamed it too. So everything they said, every boof or mistake they made would be broadcast to the world. They were really willing to come out there.
That is fantastic.
Senator Jeff Irwin's name's got to be mentioned.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's amazing. Yeah.
He is amazing. I'd love to see him as governor one day.
Well, we talked about him ambassador to someplace, didn't we say earlier, Jamie? We thought he'd be great.
Yeah, I'd like to see him as governor also. Really, whatever he wants to work on, I'd support. So let's get to the Court of Appeals thing here. We're waiting for Sam to come on, and we'll get back on the election stuff for a minute. But yeah, I would like to hear about your perspective on that, Paul.
You know, the thing that I can't shake really has to do, and especially I think with the extraction issue, really has to do with, let's say, form over function, right? A lot of the rules behind where you can and can't do your extraction are going to be grounded more in policy and more in like good neighbor theory rather than anything that you can dissect or apply from the language of the law. I don't know. I don't know if anybody's going to say, "Hey, do you want to run the chance of having what happened to that guy happen to your neighbor or happen next to your house or things like that?" I think that's going to be more controlling than anything in the law, and they're going to reverse engineer the reasoning into that policy. And I can't. I mean, maybe I'm taking things too largely these days, but like, I just look at it to say, what are you after, and how'd you get here? And that's kind of my feeling.
Paul, doesn't the law currently just ban butane blasting in the curtilage of a residential structure?
That's the issue. Is it's specific about the type and where, right? So obviously they define, curtilage and all that stuff. So they're going to talk about your outbuildings, and it's going to include your barns and whatnot, as long as it's in a residential area. But you know, are we moving towards a place where it says you can't, what's the language I want to say here? You can't engage in high pressure process in a residential area and essentially just eliminate the ability to do any kind of extraction or any kind of, you know, which would also include, I think by its definition, it would include things like brewing or other activities that where you're kind of creating a pressure bomb.
How about in a acetylene tank if you have a home welding kit?
I was just going to say, like, my first thought with that are guys that run auto shops, repair shops. I mean, I even think of like, certain things that use pressure, like, again, it goes back to mechanics or even like landscape guys where you're creating, or the, even builders, you know, where you're using like the 22 shell to drive the nail in through the board into the concrete floor. I mean, there's a ton of other applications to where, you know, yeah, they want you to not blow up your house and not try to hurt yourself and not try to hurt your neighbors. Yes. Are they going to try to, like I said, are they going to try to do that no matter what, you know?
Paul, we lost you for a moment on your audio there, my friend.
Yeah, a little glitch in the connection for a second for Paul.
Yeah, you know that Grosse Pointe internet is just not good. What can I tell you?
Over on the east side.
You gotta understand what he's saying, and then part of the problem is too, I think it's drawn out of like Michigan Medical Marijuana Act.
Yeah. Well,
it's gonna come out and come back in maybe.
Yeah. The law was changed in I think 2015 or 2016 to outlaw this after a couple people blew up their houses and such like that. So that actually is part of the law. The question becomes, was that law properly applied in this instance? It bothers me that the legislature got together and passed something that was signed by Rick Snyder that specifically targeted this one particular type of manufacturing. And it's always bothered me. It always seems like a manipulation from the business community and not necessarily from the law enforcement community, because I think the business community wanted to take away a very lucrative angle that the illegal market was utilizing in order to make sales. I don't know. The logic behind some of the changes that have been made to the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act seem murky at this point. Again, we talked earlier about Senate Bill 660. That's a pharmaceutical grade marijuana act. There was so much action about that. That consumed us for like 2 years. The Prairie Plant Bill for the Canadian company coming in. Remember they were going to grow cannabis in old mines up north? Remember that?
No, copper mine in the UP.
Exactly. Yeah, they had all kinds of crazy things for 2 years. That's what we talked about, and that was an emergency at the time. Our emergencies are just constantly changing, but still at the same level of threat. They still need to be addressed, and there really is nobody. There's a movie out there, Hellboy, where they say that we are the ones that bump back in the night, and that's essentially sometimes how we've got to feel. There are so many forces trying to corrupt what we spent so much time creating, this beautiful law that we have in Michigan that is the envy of other states. And there are so many people that would just like to turn it into another piece of manipulated territory that the wretched and wicked legislature.
Didn't Randy Richardville, chief of staff, go on to start his own cannabis group?
Yeah, I think that's that Derek Durante guy, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was another little takeover attempt.
Well, and we saw Jones's chief of staff, that wonderful woman. I can't recall her name right now, Sandra, if I'm not mistaken. And then also this guy who used to work for Clint Kesto, who's out and selling his body available some places.
Early on, the staffers from Colton's office were thinking about how they're going to get in on all this kind of stuff too. So
we've seen
new opportunities for everybody, I guess.
We've seen Colton slithering around some municipal meetings too, haven't we, Jamie? He's still out there. Paul smiles because he remembers the difficulties we had with Mr. Colton.
He's kind of like being a lobbyist / consultant and trying to soak up his participation.
Which is, that's the part that I always find funny, and I always find kind of conflictual with some of the Republican positions is that, you know, I think we as a community, we've had a lot of success in the business side and the money side as the appeal to a lot of the Republicans. And it has seemed to work for a lot of them. Well, let's just say about most of them. But then they'll do so quietly, or they'll do so in the name of politics, and they'll do so under the guise of the give and take, the mutual hand washing, hand back scratching of politics, whereas they'll never come out and take the proactive stance, the affirmative stance that yes, they do in fact support cannabis as it stands. Even though, again, I think that once you start getting into, and this is where I think some of this pro pot Republican thing comes from, is that, yeah, it is about the business. Yeah, there are a lot of people who aren't about the cause, that aren't about the community. They're here to capitalize on it. They're here to make money on selling weed. I mean, that's kind of, and they make no bones about that. So that's something that kind of surprises me too, is to say, okay, even if you're Republican, you can't come out and say it. We know that you're the kind of guy that's going to capitalize and be the kind of participate in the kind of thing where you're going to say, I can make money selling weed. And they're going to be okay with it because now it's a legitimate business. And now you look like one of those, you look progressive because it's the new .com boom. It's the new gold rush. So that type of stance, again, you know, Republicans love to be hypocritical, but they can't play both sides of the fence too long. And I think the money is going to start to talk too loud to where they're just going to have to own up to it. And frankly, I think it's not going to be a big deal. Like I remember after Whitmer, you know, kind of had that, I think it was like 6 weeks worth of like kind of visible pro-marijuana activity, again, with Hash Bash and the like, and she did something on 420 as well. I thought there was going to be some pushback on that, and I didn't see anything that was effective. Nothing in my mind was like, oh, you really capitalized on the weed fear and you really took an ad out to, you know, to target those who are, you know, Republicans against weed, and here's a reason. But I just didn't see it. And it was one of those deals where like even Nestle came out and did it, and it didn't seem to be a big deal. It seemed fairly platform consistent to be like, oh, okay, running as a Democrat, you're taking a pro-marijuana stance. That's consistent. That's consistent with the platform, consistent with the messaging. So I don't think that that's something that even now and going forward in the future is going to be viewed as a bad thing. I mean, it might be certainly in Grand Rapids and on the west side of the state where there's more play with that kind of shit. But I just think generally you're not going to see it. Again, because of youth or education or experience, you know, or the fact that, you know, more than half the voters approved of recreational marijuana here.
I agree completely. In fact, when we, as a MI Legalized board, were trying to decide about endorsements and candidates, and the group wanted to endorse Nestle, of course, and being in Grand Rapids, I really wanted to at least give Pat an opportunity to endorse legalization. So we met with him and he would not do it. And so we just straight up said, well, you know, we're going to support Nestle, and we don't see any reason why you wouldn't support this. You know, it looks like Prop 1's going to pass. I mean, a clear majority of people in Michigan are in favor of this. And then he actually called us the day we were about to announce Nestle's endorsement and said, okay, I'm in. I definitely, yeah, I'm behind it. I'm behind.
I didn't read it before. Now I read it. I didn't realize it's okay. So
it's too late, my friend. I mean, I'm grateful. Welcome to the right side of things, and we're thrilled. But it's just you're too late. But just the fact that guy who is super centrist jumped on that train in Grand Rapids was very telling. Jamie and Rick, I got to jump off. I got to get my kid. But I really enjoyed talking with you all, and good to see you, Sam, for a second. And I'll listen in to what you have to say on the way to get her. And I'm really excited about results. When are we going to find out all these results? Today?
Well, we've got the Michigan Normal broadcast going on tonight, too. It starts at 8 p.m. That'll be covering election issues, including some of the places Sam was involved in. So you can tune in there at 8 o'clock. But, I mean, polls close at 7 p.m. in some states. So, we'll see how that goes.
6
All
in
right.
Indiana.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I will tune in.
Tammy, we really appreciate you participating and
Yeah,
letting us
thank you,
know
Tammy.
what you got going on.
Yeah. All
We'll
right.
have you back on hopefully in the near future
I'd
and,
love
for
to.
some updates. Okay,
I'd
great.
love
Thank
to.
you.
All right.
So Sam Pernick, Sam, you've been very busy, sir. Very, very busy.
Good to see you guys. Good to see you all.
We talked briefly about there being 9 different communities, at least 9 that I'm aware of in Michigan, that have cannabis on the ballot. How many of those are you involved in, sir?
I'm involved in a couple of them. I'm involved in a couple of them. It's been pretty. It's been a challenge dealing with these local governments and local clerks. Kind of nightmarish, to be honest. Jamie texted me and it's like, "Do you want to come on?" I was like, "Well, but then I thought, well, maybe I'll just come on just to talk about how bad the experience has been with some of these local municipalities."
Interested in that.
Just
That has value.
just so that, no, I mean, seriously, I think that people should know what's going on. So we've been working really hard to try to get the village of Pinckney to opt in. And so for those who are unfamiliar, Pinckney is in Putnam Township. It's in Livingston County. In Livingston County, despite voting for Prop 1 by, I think, 55%, at least 55%, not a single municipality has opted in, which, I guess Livingston County is fairly conservative, fairly anti-cannabis, but not a single one. So Pinckney will be the first. When we tried to file our petitions at the village, they wouldn't accept them. They said, "You've got to file with the township." And they refused to take our petitions. Then we brought them to the township, and the township said, "We're not going to accept them. You've got to file them with the village." This was the day that we turned in. And our person ended up putting down our signatures. The township clerk picked them up and brought them outside into the parking lot and gave them back. And then our person went back in and left them outside her office. Then apparently she left them on the side of the road. Then I get a call a couple hours later from the village clerk after threatening, to take legal action. Village clerk says, "Oh, well, we're now checking your signatures. We're in possession." But it's been very, very tough. A lot of these municipalities have not been playing by the rules, and have, my view, I mean, it's really, really disheartening.
How about Port Huron, Sam? You had to go essentially to the Supreme Court of the state of Michigan in order to get your proposal on the ballot in Port Huron.
Yeah, I mean, that was another one. I mean, so in Pinckney, so in Pinckney, we went to circuit court. We lost in circuit court. They said we didn't file with the right. They said we were supposed to file with the township, but instead we were supposed to sue the township, and we sued the village, and we sued the township, and they said we waited too long to sue the township. So the Court of Appeals reversed. Then the Livingston County clerk refused to put us on the ballot. So we went to circuit court, lost in circuit court. Court of Appeals reversed again, and they reprinted the ballots in Pinckney. It was interesting. I'll get to Port Huron in just a sec. I wanted to finish the Pinckney story though, because
Crazy how many court cases you had to go to.
Well,
and,
I mean,
how many township clerks and city clerks failed you? You're just a roadblock every step of the way.
So I actually submitted about 18 initiatives this year, and 3 made it onto the ballot because for a number of reasons. In most cases, the clerks would, in some cases they just threw out signatures. That happened in a couple of municipalities. In some cases, they waited too long to check signatures, and they said, "Oh, it's too late to put you on the ballot. The deadline's passed." And Lisa Brown actually intervened to try to keep us off the ballot at a number of municipalities in Oakland County.
County clerk for Oakland County.
Yeah, just to try to stop it, saying that it was going to cause problems in terms of the delaying the printing of ballots, which I did not think was a solid argument, considering that the printing of ballots was pushed back several weeks to begin with due to other reasons. They had to reprint for a libertarian candidate, for the Libertarian Party. They had the wrong ballot position for them. They were supposed to be number 3, and they weren't number 3 on the ballot in some cases. In any event, it was very, very tough. In Pinckney and Port Huron, we went to the Court of Appeals. So it didn't actually end up going to the Supreme Court in Port Huron. Well, I guess it depends on how you define going to the Supreme Court. The city of Port Huron, we won in the Court of Appeals. The city of Port Huron lost. They applied for leave to go to the Michigan Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied them. So I guess technically that's going to the Michigan Supreme Court.
That's what I was saying, man.
Yeah.
I mean, give yourself credit, Sam.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't have to try a case in front of the Supreme Court, but Paul, wouldn't you consider that kind of a win?
Hey, man, when you knock on the door and talk to Oz, that's good enough. When you talk to Oz,
Yeah,
call to win.
I mean, Port Huron, we gathered the signatures. It's a huge pain in the butt to get the signatures. We turned in the signatures in Port Huron. They say, well, our process, this was their whole argument. Their whole argument was, first it has to go before council. Well, first they said, we've got like 45 days to check the signatures. And then council has 30 days to review and decide if they want to adopt it. And basically, by the time that's done, it'll be too late to put it on the November ballot. So too bad, so sad. And we argued, well, that's not adhering to Michigan election law 168, 488, 3. Now I know all these, MCLs, which says that if you file by the deadline, you're supposed to go on the ballot, right?
Yep.
And they just try to keep us off the ballot. They don't want people to vote on it, right? They want control. They want the ability to decide what happens. It's not necessarily like it's partially about the issue, but a lot of it is just about the control and the power.
Yep. City of Oak Park did that to us too, Sam. You know that on the local initiative. We had to sue the city of Oak Park. The exact same thing. The mayor and the city attorney and the clerk said, oh, we don't have to put it on the next ballot. We'll decide when it goes on. We'll put it on a ballot somewhere down the road. And we had to go in and sue them. It's the same thing. You have to challenge them because some of them are not, believe it or not, even with the city attorney's advice, they're not aware of what the law is. They're just not.
Michigan legislature made it harder for us to do statewide ballot proposals too. The system really doesn't like it when the people make rules. The system likes to make rules the way the system likes to make rules, but our Constitution allows us this.
They claim they're not aware, though. They claim they're not aware of what the law is. I mean, that's the problem.
That's admitting to a dereliction in duty, though, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's your job, and you say, I don't know, then give back your salary.
I mean, I feel like it should be criminal to keep something off the ballot in the way in which this has been done. Because basically what they've done is you have a right to petition in name only. You have a right to petition unless you're willing to spend a lot of money on attorneys fighting it and do everything perfectly. Because now you have to have strict compliance. You have to meet, check every single box. You've messed one thing up. A lot of folks here know it. So it's absolutely horrendous. And it's really, really concerning.
And then other clerks are very nice and cooperative, and the cities are wonderful.
Yeah.
It's bizarre,
Yeah.
Lack of education a lot of times too.
Well, that's
lack
what I
of
believe
wanting
it
to
is, Jim.
educate yourself about it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's the person's individual motive. If you're not really into the whole cannabis thing and you want to be obstructionist, that's fine. The other thing is city clerks have their office right next to the mayor. So if the mayor says we hates this like Smeagol crawling across the rocks, right? Then the city clerk's gonna be influenced by that. There's a lot of that type of cross-departmental communication, and in some cases it leads people to do things they wouldn't normally do. Sam, you said you tried 18 different municipalities this year?
Yeah.
Stud. Wow. That's a lot of work.
We got the signatures for all except one. We were short one signature in one municipality, but we had the signatures. There's been this big, there's a lot of kind of controversy and back and forth over what you can do under Section 6.1 of MRTMA. A lot of people, some trial courts have taken the position that you can only set a number of establishments, which is not what the law says. It says provide for the number of establishments. And, basically, we lost in every single trial court. We sued in all these municipalities. Every single trial court turned us down, and we had to go to the Court of Appeals. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And we thought, well, you know, and for folks who aren't familiar with the whole kind of controversy, you know, basically these cities, they take this kind of hyper, you know, I don't know if it's correct to call it conservative, but a very anti-cannabis approach in saying you can only set the number of establishments. So if you have an ordinance that goes beyond doing that, it should be kept off the ballot. Well, there's a little thing called severability. If you put severability into your petition, it's supposed to strike anything that is unconstitutional or is not permissible under the law. Well, that was pretty much ignored and by every single judge. So it's pretty disheartening. Got to say, I've really lost a lot of faith in the system when it comes to getting things on the ballot, because basically what the message that it sends to municipalities is, well, just don't put it on the ballot, force them to go to court, and not just go to court, but in many cases you've got to go to the Court of Appeals. Yeah. Because a lot of these trial court judges are very anti-cannabis, and they're not, a lot of them do not have a lot of familiarity with election law, so it's very troubling.
So Sam, can any of the ones you collected signatures for remain eligible for a future election, or they would all have to be done from scratch?
Well, we're still working on some of them. Some are still in litigation, but a lot of them are going to have to be done from scratch again. So we're going to go back and we're going to keep working on them, right? Because we just got to keep going back, right? We're not going to give up. And I told I told some of these municipalities, I said, this is never going to end. You can keep us off the ballot this time, but we're just going to come back. We're prepared to do one every single election until it gets on the ballot and until it passes. So, let's try to work together. And some are willing to kind of come to the table, but most are not. Most are, it seems like, are kind of incapable of really taking any sort of proactive steps. It's pretty troubling.
Did you take the approach of trying to work with them directly before eventually getting to the point where you were collecting signatures for a ballot, or did you just go right for that combination?
We just went right to collect signatures. And that's, sometimes we got that pushback in Pinckney. Well, nobody came to us before. Well, frankly, the law says that we can go out and gather signatures, right? There's no requirement that council be consulted and that we have a personal one-on-one meeting with every member of the local council, right? And where we have to have the blessing of a local elected official in order to exercise our democratic rights. That's not the way the system is supposed to work. It's like we have the right as citizens to draft legislation and to put it on the ballot, and it's as simple as that. So yeah, I mean, maybe Jamie, that would have helped in a couple of situations. Maybe that would have softened opposition. That's something that we're certainly going to try to be a little bit more proactive on in the future. But my view,
couple steps first, and you're leveraging the collection, the signature gathering, and it just might be able to work it out without having to take it.
Yeah, because in for instance, me and Jim and I. We worked with the city council of Ann Arbor to decriminalize mushrooms. We were gonna, we were prepared to do it. We were ballot initiative committee, but we just never went around to collecting signatures, and we eventually got sponsors, and that's I don't know. I think it's good to kind of go through that route too, and just educate them on the benefits of having cannabis businesses in your community.
Not giving you any shit, Sam, because what you did was pretty remarkable with so many cities.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very legitimate point, Colin, and I think in some municipalities maybe that can be effective. My view was, look, if you've opted out, you've opted out, and given COVID, we had a very limited window to collect signatures, and I did not want to miss out on this election cycle. Yeah. So, that was kind of my main concern. I'm not gonna wait around to see if a city council will take 2 years to do something. That's typically how long it takes some of these. In Port Huron, it took them 2 years. They only really passed something when they saw that we were getting on the ballot. that's when they decided to pass something, an ordinance, in my view, that was significantly inferior to ours in many, many ways, including
Sam,
the fact that
how did you choose those 18 communities that you targeted with these?
well, we chose communities based on support for Proposal 1. I mean, that was kind of the primary factor. You know, you have so many communities across the state that have voted yes, that voted to opt in, and the city councils have just said no. And many of them, the vast majority, haven't even done a basic survey of residents. You know, they say, oh, well, we think that just because somebody voted yes doesn't mean that they want a local, you know, retail store. I'm like, well, that's what you think, but have you ever done a survey? Have you ever asked? Right? That's your assumption.
The proposal actually included that. So, I mean.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, there's just so much ignorance out there. It's like one of the goals of legalization is, you know, you don't have legalization if you have to drive, you know, several hours in order to buy cannabis, right? That's just, you know, that's decriminalization. That's not full legalization. There has to be a system, a regulatory system in place for, you know, production and sale. And, you know, a lot of folks just don't seem to appreciate that. You know, we had city council members who were like, oh, well, you could just order it in the mail. I had somebody say that in an open meeting. Like, yeah, just order, we don't need a local dispensary. You can just order it by mail. I'm like, well, I just want to, you know, set the record straight that you cannot order it by mail legally, you know, and we've got to, but this is what people are saying, right? You know, how did you know, I won't call anybody out by name, but somebody's like, well, yeah, well, they could just get it from their dealer. This is what an elected official said at a public meeting. I'm like, you're an elected official, you know, shame on you. Shame on you. They're referring to like a medical marijuana caregiver as a dealer. It's just the level of ignorance and lack of compassion is just really.
12 years into our medical program too, Sam. 12 years in, and we're still encountering this level of detachment.
Yeah, so I'm just, you know, when folks say, oh, well, we just need to, you know, ask for permission and wait and see if we can convince the council to take action. It's like, listen, these folks have had many, many years and they still haven't even opted into medical under the MFLA, right? They still haven't even opted into medical. You know, their job as public officials is to pass legislation and listen to the community, right? And, you know, either do their job or, you know, let people vote on it. So anyways, people can probably tell I've been pretty frustrated by this whole process. And, you know, and a lot of the misinformation that's being put up by local elected officials, like in Port Huron, you know, they're talking about how, oh, you know, this ordinance that we're proposing is, you know, it's led by outside interests who don't have the best interests of Port Huron in mind. And, you know, our proposal is good because it's going to set aside the licenses for local applicants. And, you know, you go through their ordinance and it's written by people who don't understand the industry and who don't really understand what they're doing. I mean, first, I think it's going to be hard legally to say, you know, you have to be a resident in order to hold a license. I think that just having that kind of blanket requirement is going to be very tough to enforce. You know, so in Port Huron, they're talking about setting aside 3 dispensaries for local applicants. But who are those local applicants going to be? If you want to open a dispensary, as many of us know, you need a lot of money, right? You need a lot of money. And Port Huron didn't opt in for any grows, right? So you're talking like, are we talking about people who have been like really economically disadvantaged, right? Who are going to be getting these three dispensary permits? No, you're talking about people who are, you know, have really, really deep pockets and who probably have a grow somewhere else in the state and probably other retailers, right? You know, I don't really see that as creating opportunity for the little guy. So, you know, in our proposal, of course, we have a very robust micro business program, and we create, you know, 5 Class A licenses and 5 Class Cs and, you know, 2 Class Bs and, you know, a minimum of 3 micros. And, you know, in my view, that's where there's going to be a lot of local opportunity. And Port Huron is a community that's been disproportionately impacted. It's on the MRA's list. So, I think it's kind of disingenuous, or at the very least, very best, it's ignorant to think that, oh, well, we have a local requirement. We say that we're only going to give it to folks who are local, right? That these dispensary licenses are going to go to people who've been really, really hit hard by, the war on cannabis. It's probably going to go to people who are really, pretty well off, right? I mean, that's just the reality of the industry, right? But if you have more micro business licenses, those are going to go to people who, are trying to break in and get into the industry and who have been caregivers, right? So, sorry, Jim.
Hopefully, yeah. No, it's okay. I dig it. I'm just wondering, did you or your group do follow-up campaigning, any promotional type stuff in any of the places where the ballots are active?
Oh yeah. We sent out
Put those messages to those communities and that type of thing?
Yeah, we sent out 4 mailers in Port Huron. We did phone banking. We're putting out lawn signs, right? We sent out a ton of mailers in Pinckney, knocking on doors constantly. I think a lot of folks have heard from us there. We've been very, very proactive and very, very active, phone banking, putting out signs, etc., pushing back against misinformation. So in Pinckney, we created, the ordinance allows for up to 10 license types, right? Including designated consumption, right? Including, secure transporter. And there are some folks in the village council who are like, oh, there are going to be 10 businesses all over town and trying to scare people, right? And a lot of people don't realize that, you can co-locate licenses. You can have 5 in one facility.
Have to be used necessarily if there's no room for them.
They have to be used. Like there are like licenses for, testing facilities and secure transport that are unused across the state, right? I mean, there are probably hundreds. You can go probably to any community that's opted in and find a spot to do secure transport, to do testing. I mean, maybe not any, but probably the vast majority, right? So, it's just, there's just a lot of fear tactics. We also put in a really robust community benefits program where, we didn't require it, but we said you get more points on your application if you pledge $10,000 to a fund, this community benefits fund, administered by a nonprofit designated by the city, that will go in grants to help people who've been negatively impacted by, cannabis prohibition. So in Port Huron, we think that fund can end up being $200,000 to $250,000 a year in grants. They're going to be given away each year to longtime Port Huron residents, to caregivers, to people with cannabis convictions. Like, theoretically, a group could get a grant for $50,000 to $100,000 to start a grow, right? Which is not chump change. I mean, I don't know where else. I mean, I actually don't know of any other community that's offering.
There could be a source of financing for those people that doesn't rely on a potentially predatory money partner, which is kind of one of the issues and concerns that we discussed in these.
Oh, it's a huge challenge, right? So, I mean, if your group wants to start a Class A grow in Port Huron and you get a grant for $100,000, not to say that you can do everything for $100,000, but you're off to a pretty good start. You're off to a pretty good start, and that's, in my view, that's true kind of community reinvestment. Helping out, caregivers and people who built this system. And I think that's who we really should be prioritizing. The Class A growers, people who want to start micro businesses. I think that micro businesses have, not been
utilized as like a business.
I also think they've been kind of discounted. I think that they've been discounted and overlooked, mainly because, the so-called, big players, can't get involved in them, so they're kind of dismissed. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for people who have retail space. I think that's going to be really important in the market. So anyway, we're very excited.
I'd like to read the language of that. I like the motivation behind some of the stuff.
Yes.
I mean, I just, there's a lot of talk about social equity and about, trying to ensure that we're bringing more people into the market and into the license side of things, but there has not really been a lot of follow through. It's been pretty disheartening. I don't know what Ann Arbor has done on social equity. I don't know if they've really done anything. The city, I don't think the city has really done much. A lot of, Detroit has an aggressive plan. I guess we'll see how it holds up in court, but, Ferndale, Royal Oak, all these so-called progressive or liberal cities have really done nothing when it comes to helping out caregivers get licenses. And, Flint, there's just been a lot of talk and very little action. And, if we end up with a market that's basically just controlled by a very small number of people with few opportunities, few micro business licenses, few Class A grows, I think that's pretty concerning.
Mhm.
So, I find it kind of incredible that Ferndale, place that, is known for being very progressive, has, I don't think a single kind of local kind of small business owner.
We have
Sorry,
a very
sorry, Deb.
conservative. We have a conservative mayor, hugely conservative mayor.
Sorry, Deb.
Biggest companies are in
I don't mean to
Ferndale.
pick. I'm not trying to pick on you because you're from Ferndale.
I don't care. I mean, I pick on Ferndale constantly, and I've been saying for years, and these guys will back me up. I've said it on the show. Ferndale is not progressive. Just because you have a lot of gay people living in your community does not make you progressive. They are not progressive. This is to me a conservative community. They push back every cannabis issue they have pushed back on. So what? We've got some dispensaries. Because
they're the
legally,
biggest companies, those dispensaries that are in town.
those are the huge companies. But the city council and the mayor, Dave Coulter, was very anti-cannabis as a mayor here in Ferndale. And Melanie definitely, she voted against all of our proposals. Every time we went in front of city council, Melanie, who is the current mayor, voted no. So, it's ridiculous. No, just because we have an image of being, people think we're progressive. On this issue, we are definitely not progressive.
People think of Ferndale as a little Royal Oak, right? So they kind of lump the two together, and Royal Oak is definitely a progressive city. So
probably, yeah.
And I'll tell you, Sam, Ipsy, Annie Somerville, was council member, also staffer for Senator Irwin, been on the show a bunch of times. Did add some additional things with the social equity scenario and the local ordinance in Ypsilanti, but we need a lot more of it. Maybe things that are happening in Detroit, some other stuff like that can help inspire some more of that in some of these places.
Yeah. So let me push back a little bit on what's happening at Ipsy, because I'm very familiar with what's happening there. And this is like the disconnect between talk and action, right? Ipsy said that you have to be pre-qualified in order to put in an app. So you couldn't even apply for a micro unless you were pre-qualified. Their deadline was March, right? They passed their ordinance in February. So what kind of message is that sending? The only people who applied were people who already have licenses there. And I know a lot of folks, great folks who have licenses there. And, I'm huge fans of all of them. And we were at the meeting. I think, we were at one of those meetings, Jamie and Rick, we were there. But I know folks who wanted to apply for micro business licenses and they were SOL, right? And I sent multiple messages to them. I have not seen any action taken. Why would you have to be pre-qualified to apply for a micro business license? That's ridiculous. The only requirement is that you be a resident of the state of Michigan. It's the only requirement, right? And Ipsy doesn't have a cap. The only cap is based on zoning, right? And so it would really make a difference if you're not able to apply early for a micro, and then basically you're zoned out because of the highly restrictive zoning in Ipsy. So I really don't think there have been many municipalities that have really gotten this right. I think Lansing has been very disappointing. Ipsy, Ann Arbor, Ferndale, Royal Oak is doing too. And if you try to do more, then there's all this misinformation. A lot of people don't even read the proposal. They just talk about, we're for all these things.
Yeah, they say, you got 3 dispensaries.
Yeah, devil's in the details, right? Hey, fair enough, Sam. There's room for a lot of improvement. We're gonna start winding down, and I don't think we've asked you, but do you believe that this is the most consequential election in your lifetime? In our lifetimes, you can go back a long way now that Rick's here with us.
Oh, I go back a little bit, just a few minutes longer than Rick.
I'm easy.
But you're more youthful though, so it's
Well, of course, and definitely.
Well, I'm always nervous about answering some of those questions because I worry somebody's going to go back and play gotcha or something like that. I mean, I think that in many ways, I think 2016 was probably more consequential than this election because Trump is here. So a lot of what's happened has already happened. And a lot of the change, I think, is going to be with us. And frankly, I don't think there's really any going back, even if Biden does win. So, in my lifetime, I think that if Biden does do a good job, if he wins, if he doesn't do a good job, I think we're going to end up with somebody far worse than Trump. Somebody who's far more effective and far, more dangerous, who actually follows through on these promises to deport, all these different people. I mean, he hasn't, thankfully, he hasn't followed through on a lot of this stuff. So I would say probably not, just because I think that, I think 2016 was probably more consequential, but it's certainly important. I mean, I don't know. How do you rank that sort of thing, right? And measure it in terms of
isn't it certainly the most chaotic one you've ever seen, the craziest kind of election?
I mean, hundreds of thousands of Americans are dying from disease too.
Yeah.
So
I've never seen that many people
buckling on
jump up.
pandemic response, lack of respect around the world, no environmental real approaches that make any sense. It's just too much on the line. That kind of magnitude is how I look at it, I guess.
It's like overwhelming,
But I mean,
balance of powers.
I mean, I think that's true, but I also think that it's easy to forget how bad Bush was. Bush killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people in Iraq and lied, to take the U.S. to war. Hundreds of thousands of innocent people. I mean, and what that did and what the war in Iraq did, I mean.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that sets a standard that's okay now.
But he did it with a
smile. Still want to get rid of his ass, I mean.
Right?
I know, but like 2004, I mean, that was a big election too. So it's I don't know. They're all hugely important.
Well, of course, they all have huge influence on our lives. But I guess to me, there's a lot of additional magnitude with the just extreme, dangerous absurdity, tragic absurdity that's gone on with this president. But you are right. There's huge importance with all of these things, with all of the elections. But anyways.
Just a reminder for everyone, tune into our election night coverage with Michigan Normal this evening starting at 8 p.m. You'll be able to catch that through Zoom. I've already posted the link for everyone. It's available on the Facebook page or on several different listservs that we have. So check that out. There's an event created for it, and you can join at any time for any length of time. You don't have to stick with us all, but we'll probably be going till midnight.
Nice. Sam, I really appreciate the work that you're doing, man. I mean, getting a little bit more on the story and some of the details on the approach. I'm all about it. I'm impressed, and I thank you for putting out that effort.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, I appreciate it.
We do.
Yeah, I ditto that. I second that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Good luck with all your contests tonight. You have at least 3 to keep an eye on. So, Sam, we are also keeping an eye on those 3 as well as the others. And feel free to come and jump in on the Zoom call if you get any success in it. I'm sure you'll win all 3.
Well, we'll see. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. But anyway, all right. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate you having me.
Thanks.
Thank you, man. We'll check on you later and get an update at some future show. Thanks a lot, man.
Okay, sounds good.
Have a good night.
Thanks to our other guests too, Tammy Vandenberg of the West Michigan Cannabis Guild and attorney Paul Talenda from Grosse Pointe, famed cannabis attorney. So
he revealed his true feelings on the results of the election tonight. And we didn't get too deeply. The tech failed us when we were really talking about the Court of Appeals. We'll pick that up again, I guess. Maybe see if he wants to join us again or whatever. We'll pick that up again next week. But we mainly hit the election pretty hard today, and there's still a lot to talk about, really. But I think we did a good job of hitting on the really important parts of what's at stake.
You take a minute, decompress, join us at 8 o'clock. Deb's got a big TV she's going to be glued to. She'll be giving us updates, I'm sure, during the broadcast tonight.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, they're not going to hear anything about the president until the last polls closed countrywide. They don't do it because years ago they did it, and they announced somebody won who didn't win, and it was really bad. So they don't do it. They won't let you know anything until California's closed.
We have a ton of other races that we're keeping an eye on.
But there's lots of other races. But for sure, that shit'll start. Yeah.
Identified a bunch of different governors. There's Senate races that can be crucial too.
Watch,
we have lots of things to pay attention to.
We didn't talk about the progressive. We didn't talk about the progressive prosecutors. Vincent Gregory possibly taking off. Bouchard. There's some other cool stuff under there too.
There's some really intense
become
stuff
available
going
after
on.
9 p.m. Right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. and then we'll be up all night watching for the other stuff. And I don't know. I want to see Trump either run away. I think he's going to pack up his marbles and say "fuck this" and run back to wherever he holes up, or
Florida.
drag his ass out.
Hey, yeah, I want to thank Medical Mondays too. We've been on there a lot consistently, and last night we had a great precursor conversation to this one. There was some good stuff there last night too, and so one or both those guys would have joined us today, but hopefully they'll be back.
It's gonna be a big night.
420 post tomorrow, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Take a look for that, and then of course Jamie does the Planet Green Trees 8 p.m. Thursday evenings. Look
Yes,
for that
he
too.
does.
Yeah. Any decriminalized nature or any other thing of interest, Jim or Colin, you'd like to get in there?
Initiative 81 in Washington, D.C. It's on ballot today.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's for right.
That's a decrim nature.
Yeah.
The other one is like there's two in Oregon. One's to like decriminalize all drugs, and something is like psilocybin therapy is the other one. So
one would decriminalize meth, heroin, cocaine. The other one would just allow.
In Oregon, right?
It's Oregon, yeah.
And entheogenic substances in the second one. So
not all entheogenic substances. I think it's like a. I don't really know the full extent. Maybe I'll
lick toads
read up on it before the
for sure
thing tonight. Podcast thing tonight.
No, it's all good. It's cool. This stuff's going on too in the midst of all these other things. Keep an eye on those things too. So I really appreciated today's conversation. Learned a lot more. I'm going to be jumping on the normal election watch discussion later on tonight too. And appreciate Tammy and Paul and Sam for joining us. And thank you guys very much, because
thanks, man.
Doing the best we can. It's out of our hands now. We'll
no matter what, tomorrow we're still gonna wake up and get high. So
that's right.
And next Tuesday's show could be very interesting. It could be a week worth of chaos and confusion across the nation.
We might have to have a pre-week podcast.
Like a
maybe
Thursday,
we get some good news. Maybe we just get on and celebrate.
Get on for real.
I like the idea.
If we don't get some good news, we'll wait till Tuesday and then we'll roller coaster that. That's all right.
Yeah,
lots of
crazy happens.
All right, you guys, thank you very much. And good luck to everybody for who they want to win.
Good evening, over.
See you guys. Jazz Cabbage.